back. This is Diane and Andrew. We are again here on Radiant Homes. And you see, this is an important episode to talk about Adoration Avenue. Wonderful name. What's that?
You know, Adoration Avenue is the street that you walk on when you first meet your mate, or when you first lay eyes on your child. It's that wonderful street that gives you good feelings. I don't know if you've ever walked on a beautiful street, but last week we went through a story. You want to tell us that story of the rescue mission from the mine?
Yeah, last time we looked at some people who are mining gold underground and...
copper, you mean?
It was copper.
Yes.
Yeah, copper, gold. They were looking for expensive things underground. And then the mine collapsed. This was in Chile, and then they started a rescue operation. And one of the first things we set up in the previous episode was communication. They set up communication, and that became a baseline and an important lift in their rescue. We agreed that any collapse in communication is fatal for a home. And any build-up of communication is good for a home. These rescuers did something else that we're going to look at today in the Adoration Avenue.
So these guys had to set up an Adoration Avenue, quite literally, for them to build up their communication. And the essence of today's conversation is for us to learn how to adore one another, to admire one another, and to build fondness. So come with me to this mine, where these people are stuck with
underground,
no air, no food. In fact, they only had a chunk, they had milk, and this milk was to last them for 2 days, and there are 33 of them.
So what did they do?
So they had to find a way to make the milk last for at least 1 month, that is before they were found. They had no washrooms, and it was too hot in there. And so you can imagine the first few days in the little space that they had. You go for your washroom business around where the others are, and the most likely thing this would elicit is criticism. Like, you just spoiled the air, you just dirtied the environment, or And criticism is one of the things that exists in our homes. Maybe what forms of criticism have you seen around homes?
Well, there is natural criticism. We are born to look for negative things, and that's one of the things we want to deal with today. To train yourself to be able to look for the positive. Did you know that if you wanted to find something negative, you will always find? And did you know that if you wanted to find something positive, you will?
You'll always find.
In fact, some writer puts it this way. Develop in yourself an ability to look for positive things. The very fact and character of looking for negative things in people develops that negativity in you. And the criticism is one of the top predictors of divorce. It's negative communication. So today, we're going to look through the essence of criticism. You can criticize someone's person. You can offer constructive feedback on, let's say, how we are doing the show. That is about the show. But you can say those guys are down, outright dumb. Now, that is criticism of the person. Do you know other forms of criticism?
It's criticism of the person or attacking somebody's character or personality. And Dr. John Gottman lists criticism as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He says that there is an apocalypse in marriage, like there is something bad literally waiting to happen. And he lists 4 things. That is criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling.
But there is natural law that if you criticize me, I will defend myself. So is there a way we can overcome criticism?
I remember what we used to do. When we got married, there was something that would happen at home. He would come home and he loves his things very clean, and he would begin at the door and start saying,
I think everybody loves clean things.
Of course, but it would make me feel criticized. He would come and say, the shoes are not well arranged. Why wasn't this part of the house cleaned? And why wasn't this done? And this was also not done. And one time I just broke down and cried and said, can't you ever see any good thing done in this house? And so we came up with a rule. What rule was that?
Later, I decided I will look for good things. Now, I was under duress to look for 10 good things before I can land the bad one. And you see, when I looked around, I found plenty of good things that were in the house. It's called gratitude.
Yeah.
Well, friends, Adoration Avenue is deliberate walk in a direction to find out good things, good attributes about your environment, about your people. And you don't need just to find them out. You need to communicate them when they are alive, you know, so that they hear. It's important to them. It builds their self-esteem. It builds their confidence that even though they may not be everything, but there's something they do well.
Yeah, but I think it's important, honey, to clarify that criticism and complaints are different.
Exactly.
No, there is a concept he likes saying at home that every company has a good customer care desk.
Yeah.
The customer care desk is the point where you can go and raise a complaint and say, hey, your products were not good, can I return them? And the customer care officer on the other side will say, oh, thank you very much. We appreciate your feedback. I don't know if you've met those customer care officers.
They don't become defensive and say you are the one who picked the wrong one. You know?
Yeah, and they don't say you're the wrong customer for our products. They simply say thank you very much, and they say it with a smile, despite many times the customer coming back in rage. And we like saying that every relationship needs a customer care desk. That means we should be able to complain and accept complaints from our partner. You know, that Andrew can come home and raise a complaint and say, hey, you know, honey, you spoke with me badly. That was not nice.
What if I come and say, hey, honey, you are getting stupid in the way you are speaking?
Now, that is criticism.
Okay.
Because that is attacking
the person. Yeah. So, well, that is an important lesson for us today, to learn that we can organize our homes in a way someone can give feedback. But while we give feedback, it must not overshadow the good things that someone is doing. So before we come to how we can inculcate this character, you said criticism makes someone to be defensive. What's the other horseman? You use a difficult term.
The other horseman is contempt.
Contempt, sasa. Hiyo ni nini sasa?
Contempt can be shown in speech and in behaviors. And I think more commonly we see it in behaviors. Yeah? Like, for example, you find, let me use a child. A father tells a child something and the child decides to become contemptuous. So they look at the father back and roll their eyes.
Yes,
like,
or they sneer.
Yeah, or they sneer, you know, somebody will do that long, how is that thing?
Stew.
That one. Yeah.
That's contempt
So
now.
That is contempt. Or when you walk out
and you can't feel adored if someone shows you contempt, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like they're ignoring your presence, or they're ignoring what you said, or your genuine concern.
Or sometimes it can be silence.
Silence.
Yeah.
Can
silence
be contempt.
in conversations can sometimes be contemptuous. Especially when you've not communicated that I need time to think, or I will get back to you in this long.
Or maybe you are flooded, you are angry, but when you just go silent, that's not a good avenue to go, because Adoration Avenue has a lot of feedback, has a lot of talk. Somebody tells you, well, I like this, I don't like this. People are just talking and they're enjoying the conversation. That's an important aspect of relationship.
Yeah, and so contempt is one of the horsemen that is showing you are going the wrong direction.
I want us to remember, number one, criticism. What is criticism? Criticizing the person, looking what they have done, you don't appreciate. And then the other one is defensiveness. Defensiveness. It was not me. You know, since the days of Adam to Aaron.
And do you remember the story of rice and
before rice? You know, our people, especially in the country where I come from, people are very defensive and they shift blames to every other person. Someone gets late, then they say traffic. Really, traffic? You know, why are you broke? Government, taxes, neighbors, religious
climate change.
You know, in fact, Adam and Eve would have used climate change. If they knew it, they would have said the tree in the middle of the garden ripened fast. So we must be careful when we are shifting blames to somebody else. When somebody gives you a feedback, look through and see, in fact, in any problem at home, there is a part you have played. Home should also be a place where someone can actually just come and talk to you about the issue, because if they don't, they sure will talk to someone else, and it might be outside home, and it's not nice.
Yeah.
So that was all on criticism, contempt, and defensiveness and contempt. What's the last one?
So the last one, according to Dr. John Gottman, is stonewalling.
Yeah.
And stonewalling is that you don't let the other person into your emotions.
Yeah,
Remember in our
you
first
turn
show?
like this, you know.
Oh yeah,
just
you
talk
turn away.
while I'm facing this side. This is example of stonewalling.
Yeah, and many times our relationships are like this. He's looking the other way, and you are simply talking to somebody who's not willing to look back at you. You can't tell what he's looking at and which direction he's facing.
And the opposite of stonewalling is to turn to each other, isn't it?
Yes.
To look out for what are they saying, why
Yeah.
are they saying it like this, what is their emotion, and things like that.
Yeah. And so stonewalling is something that you'd want to avoid in your relationship, where you're not blocking the other person away from you. Let them into your world. You want to let each other into each other's world.
And that speaks to what we did in the previous episode, where we said, okay, somebody needs to know what I'm going through. What are the stresses I went through? Why are you complaining today? Are you sick? What? Updating each other's maps, we called it.
Emotional
atlases. So now you remember. That's what we did last time. So let's go now to the part where, if these things exist in a family, is there something we can do? Is there hope, or we are done?
There is a lot that we can do, and I want to urge you to join us right after the break so that we can continue learning. How do you grow the Adoration Avenue? How can you walk these streets again? Join us right after the break.
Welcome back, friends. You see, now this is the time where you want to call your family and sit around. At the end, we're going to give you a practical activity to do in nurturing adoration. Let's walk the Adoration Avenue together. Before we went for the break, we alluded to some guys stuck underground and some people doing bad things to let the place look good. What did the other friends do?
So these friends had to rally around one another and attach value to each member of the team. This team of 33 miners had diverse ages.
Yeah.
They had old men, they had sick people, they had young men, they had people who would do crazy things inside the mine, which they swore never to tell anyone outside. But they learned how to attach value to each and every member of the team. And that's one way of building adoration amongst one another. I like asking that whether or not you like the president, if you were called to stand before the president, most likely you will address him as His Excellency
EGH, KBC, Doctor.
KBC, no.
I mean, all those titles.
Yes.
Order of the Burning Spear.
Yeah.
All the many titles that Moi likes to use. So, number one, in building adoration in your family, you want to attach value. Train yourself to attach value. A story is told of a young man. Let's give his name. I want to make them Indian. Let's call the man Pendra. And then the lady, they were dating, courting, or in a marriage. Let's call the lady Kendra. Pendra and Kendra. So, Pendra, the man, inherited a watch, a very expensive armless pocket watch from his family, and it had a high value, a high jewel value. And then Kendra had this good hair, that you would even sell and to the wig makers. So, birthday was approaching. Kendra decided, I'm going to do a surprise for my boyfriend. She went and sold her hair to the wig makers and bought the arms of the watch. In other news, the other side, Pendra also went and sold his watch and bought a comb, an expensive comb, for this lady's hair. Then they met. Surprise. One didn't have a watch, it sold it. The other one didn't have hair, sold it. But the moral of that story is deep appreciation for each other. You see, we can train ourselves that we attach value to people. When you meet someone, the first minute you meet them, is it your common behavior to find something good that they have done? Because that will go into your vocabulary.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is capable of kindness. What do you think?
That is very true. And I remember what you used to tell me. Whenever we would meet, security guards, cleaners, he would say, treat these people kindly, because the way you treat them is eventually how you'll treat me. Because one time he will act worse than the cleaner, or he will act worse than the security guard. And that brings us to the second point, where
what's the second point?
You need to make courtesy a daily activity or a daily habit.
Yeah.
So courtesy is a way of life. If you can't be courteous to your neighbor, if you can't be courteous to your friend, if you can't be courteous to the general population, there is definitely no way you're going to maintain courtesy with your spouse or with your husband or with your children.
Let's say if you can't be courteous, you can't be married. Or let's say it this way, courtesy should be a baseline of behavior. It should be trained in children. It should be our DNA. When you meet someone, the way you address them, I can't call you Diane. You are Miss or Mrs. Diane. Just a way of being...
Really? You'll call me Mrs.?
Miss Honey. I mean, just, in cultures where the first thing you meet with some fine-tuned people, and it's good grace of Christianity to just be refined, to know, even when we are fighting, when things go wrong, the basic minimum we should fall to is courtesy. I mean, that's one way of splashing Adoration Avenue with good flowers. Everyone will like to walk around that avenue, even when things go wrong. So train yourself. You go to the office, find a way of talking to people in a way that lifts their dignity. We're not saying you become this, you start being a sycophant all through, but there is always something you can say that is good about someone. Is that right?
Yeah, and courtesy exists in the little things of life. There is a mentor of mine who would say, there is power in a good morning. When you enter the office in the morning and you say hi to everyone and you're like, good morning, so-and-so, good morning. People start saying, this person always has a good spirit. She always says hi. And you'll find in our homes, even some spouses have never had a good morning from you. You're so angry. You're like, why should I tell him good morning? It's not good anyway. You're grumbling. You're always talking under your breath until this person is like, why is this person just roaring like a lion? Yeah. So
seeking whom to
exactly. So sometimes things are hard, but you simply want to be courteous. When you wake up in the morning, he likes doing this. Even when we've quarreled, he will wake up and say, okay, good morning, honey. He'll wake up and say, okay, good night. It's little, but it tends to build admiration between the two of you, to just say good morning, good night. And when you've not been courteous, learn to say, I'm sorry. Men, can you learn to say?
I'm sorry, pia ni courtesy. I'm sorry is...
I'm sorry, bas.
Oh, pole bas.
Pole bas.
Okay. Well, friends, courtesy is good sense. Even saying sorry. Men, can you practice? I'm going to pause. I am sorry. Just say I'm sorry for today. It's good sense to just be courteous to anyone. What's the third way of building adoration in the home? Number one, we said we want to value everyone we meet, and everybody is valuable.
And on value, this is what I like telling myself, especially when he's offended me and I feel like talking badly. I start imagining he's the president of the republic. If you were talking to the president of the republic or the king of England, you'd not just say...
Even if they have annoyed you with taxes.
I know. You'll probably be kind or kinder in how you express.
It's the Romans who had a good attitude towards their coin, which demonstrates value. They would never step on the coin. They said, perhaps Caesar's head is on the coin. And the truth is, on every person you meet, on their face, in their heart, there's the imprint of Jehovah on their face. So value everyone. Is that a good thing?
And what was number 2?
Now the number 2 is courtesy as a baseline. Just baseline courtesy. Hi, good morning. How are you? Baseline. Train it so that you don't go below it, where you start. Niuebas. I mean, that is not courtesy. Even if you are angry, just say, okay, let me walk away. I will come back soon.
Exactly.
Is there a third way to inculcate adoration in our homes?
The third way is perspective.
What's that?
Perspective is what you see and how you see life. We have a saying in medicine that the eye sees only what the eye knows. So that means if your eye only knows negative things, even when you go to church and there is a very good sermon, you'll be like, this preacher's tie was not matching his pocket chief. His belt and his shoe were not matching. He made English grammatical errors. And the choristers were singing off-key. I'm sure you've met people like that. Nobody likes negative people. Perspective. How do you look at life?
Is that the reason why when we bought our first car, we so noticed the same type of car is so many pieces and many of it in the streets? I earlier thought it was a very exotic car. It was not there. So the eye sees what the eye knows. Is that right?
Exactly.
So you must train yourself to look for good in people when your children come back home, before you find out what they have done wrong. There are these homes where everything is do not, do not, do not. Even the commandments do not begin with do not. They begin with thou shalt have. Thou shalt. 6 days you shall work. Remember, it's not all do not, it's not all bad, isn't it? And when we make our homes radiant like that with joy of positivity, it's called, let me demystify this. There is a big English word called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation is where you have adapted to what you have until you don't think it's important. I do journal every day. So you want to train yourself to write to gratitude journal your gratitude. I wanted to say gratitude your journal. But you can do so, even gratituding your journal. That means your journal has everything you are thankful about. Everything you're thankful about. It starts to become your lifestyle. You see, when you don't have a car, you pray for a car. Let's say when you don't have a wife, that would make sense. When you don't have a wife, you pray for a wife. Then you get a girlfriend. You wonder, why don't people have girlfriends? You marry, and then you start adoring the girl married year 1, year 2, you say, Daktari and I, if you are married to Daktari like me, or engineer and I, Then after 2 years, you start wondering, why are people not married? You don't think that what you have, it could be health, it could be life, it could be children, is something to be grateful about. It's a perspective you build into your system. But let's look at the fourth one. What can we do to keep this Adoration Avenue blossoming with good flowers?
So the fourth thing we can do is to create memories and activities that trigger adoration.
What's that?
So, like, for example, back to our story in the mine. Let's say you are one of the miners and you decide today you're going to clean up and the other miners celebrate you. The likely thing you're going to do the next day is clean up again.
What if at lunchtime they start celebrating how you cleaned up in the morning? It will boost your mood. You'll start feeling like, hey, these guys really appreciate what I did yesterday. So there are two things there. One is to do something that creates adoration. What would that be? Things that create memories. Like as we went to Naivasha and, you painted.
Yes. Yeah. I love painting.
And how did you feel when I just raised that thing again?
I'm so excited. Every time we pass by there, I'm like, honey, let's go paint. Because I love painting. So it has very good memories for me. But honey, there is a mistake that many women make. And that is not celebrating or creating good memories. Like, for example, let's say a man has bought you a gift that you are not anticipating.
You need to wanted
the gift, a bigger gift. Yeah. So this bigger gift, some women will look at it like, Sasa, you've only bought me a watch. Me, I wanted a bag and a dress and a trip to Dubai. I like telling women, if he makes even the smallest attempt make a huge party.
Akinunua nguo, vaa hiyo nguo, ukienda market, everywhere. You just wear that cloth everywhere.
Because it will create a good memory for him that I did something memorable.
Now, we want to invite your family, you and your wife, you and your children, call them around and let's do a little exercise here today on Adoration Avenue. Why don't we try and remember, it's called talk history. So you need to sit in the evening and talk about, for example, how you met. I still remember how we met.
How did we?
Well, it was in high school and you were you had a nice walk. That's what I remember.
I had a nice walk.
Do you remember one thing about our wedding?
Yes, working together. Our wedding was, I think that's where we learned how to really work together in planning and just to stick with what we've agreed with. That is what I remember most about and singing at the wedding.
Yeah, singing at the wedding and your uncle saying, Mr. and Mrs. Hokwan. I still remember that part. And then when we went for the honeymoon, we ate some fish that was in deep sea in a big bowl. So what we want to ask you to do at home down there is look for ways to remember, to recall, exhume. If you must exhume anything in the past, let them be good memories.
Good memories.
The second thing you can do for today is do an I appreciate moment. Recall a moment when your spouse was very energetic, very organized, when they were very charismatic.
Or very supportive.
Or
looking very beautiful.
Yeah, there's a day I remember we were in JQuat just the other day, and you stood up and you just mentioned very good attributes of me and said, that girl will become a CS. Well, friends, admiration is not rocket science. Everyone can be courteous. Everybody can pass through Adoration Avenue. We want to ask you, take all your family to that avenue. Appreciate each other, talk positive, and let's build radiant homes on the sounds of positive vibes.